Welcome to today's deep dive. We're going to be exploring the life and work of André-Marie
Ampère.
Ampère.
Yeah, a name you might recognize from
The unit.
the unit of electrical current.
Absolutely.
But his story
Goes way beyond that.
goes way beyond just that. Yeah. And to guide us, we have excerpts from a biography of Ampère.
Okay.
Chapters 1 through 6 plus the annex.
Wow, that's a lot of material.
Yeah, we're gonna delve deep today, and you'll learn how Ampère's life kind of intersected with major historical events, discover his hidden passions beyond electricity, and see why he earned the title,
Okay.
the Newton of electricity.
That's quite a title to live up to, wouldn't you say?
It is.
And it came from James Clerk Maxwell.
Yeah.
One of the most influential physicists of all time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So let's rewind back to Ampère's childhood. He was born in 1775, right in the heart of revolutionary France.
Wow.
And here's the kicker. He never went to school.
What?
Yeah.
How is that even possible?
Yeah.
I know his father was a firm believer in Rousseau's philosophy of education.
Okay.
And instead of formal schooling, he encouraged learning from nature and pursuing personal interests.
Interesting.
You can really see the impact of that upbringing throughout Ampère's life. He wasn't confined to any one field. He was a true polymath, soaking up knowledge in math, chemistry, philosophy, even poetry.
It's almost like he was destined to be a Renaissance man, even though he lived well after that period.
I know, right?
Yeah.
There's a story about him as a kid, totally engrossed in Lavoisier's chemistry texts.
Oh, yeah.
Even then, he was fascinated by classifying and organizing information.
That fascination with finding patterns and creating order would become a key part of his scientific thinking. We see it early on in his work on classifying differential equations.
Okay.
Foundational work that unfortunately hasn't gotten as much recognition as it deserves.
Yeah, it's amazing how some things get lost to history.
It is.
But then there's his work in chemistry.
Okay.
And this is where it gets really interesting. Ampère was already theorizing about molecules long before their existence was widely accepted.
Really?
He even came up with some of these ideas independently of Avogadro,
Wow.
who's often credited with similar theories.
Yeah, Ampère had this incredible ability to conceptualize things that couldn't be seen,
Right.
which really paved the way for future scientific discoveries.
Yeah.
He wasn't afraid to challenge existing ideas and propose something totally new.
It takes a certain kind of mind to see beyond what's already known,
It does.
don't you think? But Ampère's life wasn't all about equations and theories.
Right.
He experienced a lot of personal tragedy as well.
Yeah, his personal life was marked by some deep sorrow, which undoubtedly influenced his scientific work. He lost his father during the French Revolution, which plunged his family into financial hardship.
It's hard to imagine coping with that kind of loss at such a young age. And then there's his romantic life. The sources mention love letters and poetry dedicated to his first wife, Julie.
Oh.
They had a deep connection, but sadly, she died young.
That loss had a profound impact on Ampère. It led him to a second marriage that wasn't happy, and these experiences definitely shaped his outlook on life. It's a reminder that even brilliant minds are still human, dealing with the complexities of life and loss.
It's almost as if the intensity of his personal life fueled his intellectual pursuits. And then in 1820, a major scientific discovery shook things up.
Yeah.
This is where Hans Christian Ørsted enters the picture.
Ørsted conducted a seemingly simple experiment. He placed a compass needle near a wire carrying an electrical current,
Okay.
and the needle moved.
Oh, wow.
This might not sound earth-shattering, but it was a complete revelation.
Really?
It demonstrated a direct link between electricity and magnetism,
Yeah.
two forces that were previously thought to be completely separate.
Wow, that's a game changer. Imagine the excitement and maybe even confusion in the scientific community at that time.
Absolutely. And for Ampère, this is a turning point.
Okay.
He was instantly captivated by Ørsted's discovery. It sparked an intense fascination that would consume him for years to come.
So what was it about this connection between electricity and magnetism that drew him in so deeply?
Ampère was determined to unravel the mysteries behind this newfound relationship. He dove headfirst into research, driven by a bold hypothesis.
Right.
What if there was no separate magnetic fluid?
Okay.
What if magnetism was actually caused by electrical currents at the microscopic level?
Hold on, microscopic electrical currents. I'm trying to wrap my head around that. What did he mean by that?
He envisioned tiny loops of current within magnets, constantly swirling around. He called them molecular currents.
Okay.
It was a radical concept at the time, and it actually foreshadowed the later discovery of electrons, those fundamental particles that carry electric charge.
So he was essentially proposing a whole new way of understanding magnetism.
Exactly. He was going up against well-established theories like Biot's approach, which tried to explain things using existing models.
Right.
But Ampere was bold enough to propose an entirely new paradigm.
It takes a certain level of confidence to challenge the status quo like that, especially when you're going against the grain of accepted scientific thought.
Mm.
But how did he go about proving his hypothesis?
Ampere was known for his meticulous experimental work. He designed innovative apparatus to isolate and manipulate electrical currents, allowing him to precisely measure their effects.
Right.
We're talking hours upon hours, days upon days spent in the lab,
Wow.
meticulously gathering data to support his ideas.
That sounds like a lot of late nights and intense focus.
Yeah.
Are there any specific experiments that really stand out as examples of his ingenuity?
One particularly clever experiment involved suspending wire frames in a way that canceled out the Earth's magnetic field.
Okay.
This allowed him to isolate and study the interactions between the currents in the wires themselves, free from any outside interference.
So he could control it.
Exactly. He observed that the force between these wires was directly related to the distance between them and the strength of the current flowing through them.
And that observation ultimately led him to formulate his famous mathematical law, right?
It's exact.
This law, connecting the force between current-carrying wires to their distance and the strength of the current, laid the foundation for our modern understanding of electromagnetism.
It's amazing how a single observation, combined with brilliant insight and rigorous experimentation, can lead to such a fundamental breakthrough.
It is.
And to think this was just the beginning of Ampere's scientific journey. We'll dive deeper into his legacy and the impact of his work in the next part of our deep dive.
Ampere's law isn't just some abstract formula tucked away in a textbook. You know, it has real-world implications that have shaped the technology we use every day.
That's true. It's easy to forget that these fundamental discoveries have tangible effects on our lives. So how did Ampere's work influence the development of technology?
Well, think about the telegraph. The ability to send messages over long distances using electricity.
Right.
That wouldn't have been possible without Ampere's insights into the relationship between electricity and magnetism.
It's true.
And then there's the electromagnet,
Okay.
a magnet created by an electric current.
This invention has countless applications, from motors and generators to loudspeakers and MRI machines.
Wow. So his work really laid the groundwork for the electrical age we live in today. But even with his incredible insights, Ampere wasn't infallible. The sources mention that he actually missed discovering electromagnetic induction.
Oh, really?
The phenomenon where a changing magnetic field creates an electric current.
Huh?
It's kind of ironic considering his groundbreaking work in electromagnetism.
It's a reminder that even the most brilliant minds can overlook things, especially when they're focused on a particular path of inquiry.
Right.
But that's part of what makes science so fascinating.
Yeah.
It's a journey of discovery with unexpected twists and turns along the way.
And sometimes those missed opportunities lead to even bigger breakthroughs down the line. Speaking of breakthroughs, we can't talk about Ampere's legacy without mentioning James Clerk Maxwell,
Maxwell.
the physicist who unified electricity, magnetism, and light into a single elegant theory.
Maxwell's work built upon the foundation laid by Ampere, Faraday, and others. It's no exaggeration to say that Ampere's insights helped pave the way for some of the most significant scientific advances of the 20th century, including Einstein's theory of relativity.
Wow.
Remember that title, the Newton of electricity? It was Maxwell himself who bestowed that honor upon Ampere.
It's amazing to think about the ripple effect of scientific discoveries, how one breakthrough can spark a cascade of new insights and innovations that shape the course of history. But let's shift gears for a moment and explore some of Ampere's other interests. We've focused a lot on his contributions to electromagnetism, but the sources mentioned he was involved in other fields as well, right?
Absolutely. Remember that fascination with classification we talked about earlier?
Yes.
Well, that extended beyond math and chemistry. He even dabbled in optics and spent a considerable amount of time working on a comprehensive essay about the philosophy of science.
Optics, so we're talking about like light and vision and all that.
It's exactly. Around this time, Ampere became close friends with Augustin-Jean Fresnel, a brilliant physicist who was making waves.
Okay.
Pun intended, with his theories about the wave nature of light.
Hold on, waves? Wasn't everyone convinced that light was made up of particles back then, like those tiny little billiard balls bouncing around?
That was the dominant theory at the time, championed by none other than Isaac Newton himself.
Wow, Newton.
But Fresnel, along with Thomas Young, was reviving the wave theory that had been proposed by Christian Huygens in the 17th century.
Okay.
Their experiments on diffraction, the way light bends around obstacles, were providing compelling evidence for the wave nature of light.
So where does Ampere fit into all of this? Was he team particle or team...
Initially, Ampere was more inclined towards the particle theory. He even presented a paper on Laplacian optics in 1814, which was based on the particle model. Laplacian optics basically explained light behavior, using principles of mechanics, treating light as if it were made up of tiny corpuscles. But as Fresnel's experiments started gaining traction and the evidence for the wave theory became stronger, Ampere began to shift his perspective.
So he saw the light, so to speak.
You could say that. By 1816, Ampere was a vocal supporter of Fresnel's work. He recognized the elegance and explanatory power of the wave theory and its ability to account for phenomena that the particle theory struggled to explain.
It's fascinating how science evolves through these debates and challenges to existing theories. But even though he embraced the wave theory, Ampere's main interest wasn't just picking sides.
Right.
He was more focused on understanding the underlying principles that govern both light and heat.
Exactly. He saw a connection between the two and believed that a unified theory could explain both phenomena. He saw light and heat as different manifestations of a single underlying principle, and he spent a considerable amount of time trying to develop a mathematical framework to connect the two.
That sounds incredibly ambitious. Did he succeed in creating this unified theory of light and heat?
Not entirely. While he made some progress in connecting the theories of heat and light propagation, his efforts were ultimately cut short by his declining health and his increasing focus on electrodynamics.
It's a shame he couldn't fully pursue that line of inquiry, but it speaks volumes about his intellectual curiosity and his drive to uncover the fundamental laws of nature. Now let's talk about his foray into philosophy. What was he hoping to achieve with this grand essay on the philosophy of science?
This essay was Ampere's attempt to synthesize his vast knowledge and create a comprehensive classification system for all of human understanding.
Wow.
It was a massive undertaking spanning 2 volumes, with the second one being published posthumously by his son. It reflected his deep-seated belief in the interconnectedness of knowledge and his desire to bring order to the vast and complex world of human thought.
A classification system for all knowledge. That's quite an ambitious goal. What kind of system did he come up with? Was it based on historical developments, or did he have his own unique approach?
Ampere's system drew inspiration from various sources. He was influenced by the classification schemes of naturalists like Georges Cuvier, who happened to be his son's would-be father-in-law.
Okay.
Cuvier believed in classifying organisms based on their functional anatomy.
Right.
But Ampère also incorporated ideas from Étienne Geoffroy Saint-Hilaire, who emphasized structural similarities between organisms, even if their functions differed.
Wait, Cuvier and Saint-Hilaire, weren't they engaged in a pretty heated debate about the classification of animals?
They were. It was
Yeah.
one of the most famous scientific controversies of the 19th century.
Wow.
They have very different views on how to classify organisms, with Cuvier emphasizing function and Saint-Hilaire focusing on structure.
So how did Ampère navigate this intellectual battlefield? Did he take sides?
Ampère actually saw value in both sides of the argument.
Oh.
He appreciated Cuvier's emphasis on function and Saint-Hilaire's focus on structure. He took what he considered the best aspects of each approach and integrated them into his own system.
So what did this grand system look like? Did he manage to categorize every single piece of knowledge out there?
Ampère divided all knowledge into 2 main kingdoms, cosmology and pneumology.
Okay.
Cosmology dealt with the physical world.
Okay.
Think astronomy, physics, chemistry, geology. Pneumology, on the other hand, focused on the intellectual and moral sciences. Things like psychology, sociology, history, and philosophy.
Right.
Each kingdom was further subdivided into branches and sub-branches, creating a complex and interconnected web of knowledge.
It's like a giant, intricate tree of knowledge with each branch representing a different field of study. But did anyone actually use this system?
Not really. While Ampère's essay was certainly ambitious and showed the breadth of his intellectual curiosity, it was ultimately too complex and idiosyncratic to gain widespread acceptance. His system relied heavily on neologisms, new words he invented to describe his categories, which made it difficult for others to understand and apply. And his tendency to get bogged down in minute details also hindered its practicality.
It's a bit sad, isn't it? All that work, all that passion poured into this grand project, and it ultimately faded into obscurity.
Perhaps. But remember, even if Ampère's classification system didn't catch on, it serves as a testament to his insatiable curiosity and his desire to connect the dots between different areas of knowledge.
Yeah.
He was a true polymath, constantly seeking to expand the boundaries of human understanding.
Absolutely. And it's a reminder that not every intellectual endeavor leads to widespread recognition or immediate practical application. Sometimes the journey itself is just as valuable as the destination. Now, we've talked a lot about Ampere's work and his intellectual pursuits, but what about his personal life outside of science? We know he had a son, Jean-Jacques, who's quite a character himself.
Jean-Jacques was a man of letters, drawn to literature and history. He even had a bit of a romantic entanglement with the famous Madame Récamier.
Wait, the Madame Récamier, the socialite who hosted those legendary salons in Paris.
The one and only. She was twice Jean-Jacques' age. But that didn't stop him from falling under her spell. He was smitten with her wit, her charm, and her influential position in Parisian society. He even wrote a play for her, which his father, a lover of poetry himself, helped him get published.
That's sweet. So did they live happily ever after?
Not quite. Madame Récamier decided to spend a year in Italy, and Jean-Jacques, unable to bear the thought of being separated from her, followed her there.
Wow.
They traveled together, enjoying the cultural riches of Italy, but the relationship remained complicated. Upon their return to Paris, Ampère urged his son to marry Clémentine, the daughter of the renowned naturalist Georges Cuvier.
That sounds like a pretty good match, intellectually speaking. Both families were deeply involved in science and scholarship.
Perhaps. But Jean-Jacques, still entangled in his feelings for Madame Récamier, found the idea of marrying Clémentine unbearable. He felt pressured by his father and overwhelmed by the expectations surrounding this potential union. So he made a drastic decision. He fled to Germany.
He just up and left. That's quite a dramatic turn of events.
It was. Jean-Jacques abandoned playwriting and found his true calling in the history of literature. He immersed himself in the works of German authors and became a pioneer in the field of comparative literature, which involves studying literature across different languages and cultures. He traveled extensively, immersing himself in different literary traditions, and never married. He maintained a complicated relationship with Madame Récamier until her death in 1850.
It sounds like both Ampère and his son were destined for greatness, each in their own way. But let's not forget, Ampère's life wasn't all sunshine and roses. He faced his fair share of hardship, from personal tragedies to professional setbacks. And as we near the end of our deep dive, it's important to acknowledge the toll that these experiences took on him.
In his later years, Ampère's health began to deteriorate. He suffered from respiratory problems, and his once sharp mind started to fade. He experienced bouts of forgetfulness and struggled to maintain the same level of intellectual intensity that had characterized his earlier years. Despite these challenges, he continued to work tirelessly, driven by a deep-seated passion for knowledge. He continued his travels, inspecting schools and attending scientific meetings, all while battling a persistent cough and growing weakness. He continued his travels, inspecting schools and attending scientific meetings, all while battling a persistent cough and growing weakness.
It sounds like he was pushing himself to the limit, even when his body was telling him to slow down.
He was, and tragically his condition worsened in Marseille. On June 6th, he penned his last letter to his son Jean-Jacques, who had been pleading with him to stay put and recover. But it was too late. Just 4 days later, on June 10, 1836, André-Marie Ampère died in a simple bed at the home of the director of the Marseille College. His death was so sudden that his loved ones couldn't even make it in time to say goodbye.
A quiet end for such a brilliant mind. It seems almost unfair that someone who contributed so much to science should pass away in relative obscurity, far from home and family.
It does. And initially, that's exactly what happened. Ampère was buried in Marseille without much fanfare. The general public barely knew his name. His groundbreaking work in electromagnetism hadn't yet reached the level of popular recognition it would later achieve. It wasn't until 1869 that his remains were transferred to the Montmartre Cemetery in Paris to rest alongside his son Jean-Jacques.
At least he was finally laid to rest in a place of honor, reunited with his son in the city where he had made so many of the scientific breakthroughs. And I imagine his legacy started to gain more recognition after his death as the impact of his work became more apparent.
You're absolutely right. As the electrical age dawned and technologies like the telegraph and the electromagnet transformed society, Ampère's name started to appear in textbooks, his contributions to science finally receiving the recognition they deserved.
It's amazing how sometimes it takes time for true greatness to be fully appreciated. It's like the world needs a moment to catch up to the brilliance of certain individuals. But what about his tombstone? What words did they choose to capture the essence of this remarkable man?
On his tombstone, they engraved a fitting tribute. He contributed to human knowledge in mathematics, physics, metaphysics, and moral sciences. He created the theory of electrodynamics. He wrote the essay on the philosophy of sciences. Truly Christian. He loved man. He was simply good and great.
What a beautiful and powerful epitaph. It encapsulates the breadth of his intellectual pursuits, his dedication to understanding the world and his place in it, and his unwavering belief in the inherent goodness of humanity. It's a testament to a life well lived, a life dedicated to the pursuit of knowledge and the betterment of humankind. It's incredible to think about how much one person can accomplish in a lifetime, from revolutionizing our understanding of electricity to exploring the deepest questions of philosophy. Ampere's curiosity seems to have known no bounds.
He truly embodies the spirit of a lifelong learner, constantly seeking new knowledge and making connections across different fields. It's a reminder that the pursuit of understanding doesn't have to be confined to a single discipline.
His life story really highlights the interconnectedness of knowledge, doesn't it? And it makes me wonder, if Ampere were alive today, what would he be most amazed by?
It's a fascinating question to ponder. Given his fascination with electricity and magnetism, I imagine he'd be captivated by the world of modern electronics. The sheer complexity and miniaturization of circuits, the speed at which information travels, the wireless communication we take for granted, it would all seem like magic to someone from his time.
Can you imagine him trying to wrap his head around the internet? Or artificial intelligence? He'd probably be diving headfirst into quantum physics and computer science, eager to unravel the mysteries behind these technological marvels.
He'd be like a kid in a candy store, wouldn't he? Surrounded by these incredible tools and technologies, driven by that same insatiable curiosity that fueled his earlier discoveries.
Speaking of curiosity, what do you think is the most important takeaway from Ampere's life story for our listeners today?
I think Ampere's life serves as a powerful reminder that true genius lies not just in intellectual brilliance, but in a relentless pursuit of understanding. It's about embracing curiosity, challenging assumptions, and never losing that childlike wonder about the world around us.
It's about asking questions even, or perhaps especially, when those questions lead us down unexpected paths.
Exactly. Ampere's willingness to question the status quo, to challenge existing theories and propose new ideas, that's what ultimately led him to his groundbreaking discoveries. And it's a valuable lesson for all of us, regardless of our field of interest or expertise.
It's a reminder that learning is a lifelong journey and that there's always something new to discover, something that can spark our curiosity and push us beyond the boundaries of what we already know.
And sometimes those discoveries might even lead to breakthroughs that shape the course of history. Who knows, maybe one of our listeners will be inspired by Ampere's story to embark on their own deep dive into a subject that fascinates them.
Maybe they'll make a connection that no one has seen before, or come up with a new invention that changes the world. The possibilities are truly endless when we embrace the spirit of inquiry.
So to our listeners out there, what will your deep dive be? What mysteries will you unravel? What knowledge will you bring to light?
Ampere's life is a testament to the power of curiosity and the transformative potential of scientific inquiry. So go forth, dear listeners, and explore.
The world is full of wonders waiting to be discovered.
And remember, even if your deep dive doesn't lead to fame and fortune, the joy of discovery is a reward in itself. Thanks for joining us today.